Conflict in relationships is a reality of human existence. It doesn't matter whether the relationship is with family, friends, colleagues, or even strangers, tension is bound to arise. Even in our closest relationships, achieving harmony can be challenging, as misunderstandings and differing expectations often lead to disputes. The difficulty escalates further when dealing with those who oppose or oppress us. The struggles we face with enemies, people who intentionally work against us, can feel insurmountable. This truth applies universally across all times and places because human nature is consistent. Wherever people gather, there is potential for strife, conflict, and even violence. This was especially true in the time of Jesus. During his life, the land of Israel was under Roman occupation, a situation that created immense tension. The Romans, as the ruling power, imposed heavy taxes, laws, and cultural influences on the Israelites, often leading to resentment and hostility. Within this environment, conflict was not just a personal matter, but a collective reality that affected entire communities. In the midst of this turmoil, Jesus delivered a radical and transformative message. He offered his followers a new way to approach conflict, one that was deeply rooted in peace and reconciliation. Instead of escalating disputes or seeking revenge, Jesus taught his disciples how to work toward repairing even the most difficult relationships. His teachings were not just practical advice for conflict resolution, but a vision for how to live as citizens of God's kingdom, embodying love and compassion in every interaction. As an Israelite, Jesus built his teachings on the foundation of the covenant laws given to ancient Israel. These laws were considered divine wisdom for maintaining justice and harmony in human relationships. However, Jesus often went beyond the literal interpretation of these laws, uncovering their deeper intent and wisdom. Through his teachings, he demonstrated how these ancient principles could be applied to the complexities of life in his time and ours. One example of this can be seen in Jesus' teaching about oaths. He said, "You've heard that it was said to the ancients, 'Do not break your oath, but fulfill your vows to the Lord.'" In ancient Israel, making an oath was a serious matter. When someone swore an oath, they invoked God's name to guarantee the truth of their words or the fulfillment of their promise. This was seen as a way to build trust and prevent dishonesty in agreements. For instance, if someone wanted to borrow money, they might swear by God that they would repay the debt. Such oaths were binding because the covenant laws required people to honor their promises, especially those made in God's name. Oaths were intended to foster trust and prevent disputes. However, human nature often finds ways to exploit even the best-intentioned systems. Some people began using oaths as tools for manipulation. For example, instead of swearing directly by God, they might swear by God's temple or by heaven. This subtle distinction created a loophole. Since they hadn't invoked God's name directly, they felt less obligated to keep their word. This kind of deceit undermined the very purpose of oaths. Instead of building trust, they became tools for manipulation and dishonesty. Recognizing this, Jesus offered a radical alternative. He told his followers, "Do not make oaths at all, by God or by anything else in God's creation." At first glance, this might seem like a prohibition against making any promises. However, Jesus' point was deeper. He wasn't saying that people should never make commitments, but rather that they should live with such integrity that oaths become unnecessary. He urged his followers to simply let their yes mean yes, and their no mean no. In other words, they should be so honest and trustworthy that their words alone carry weight, without the need for additional guarantees. This teaching highlights the importance of honesty and integrity as the foundation of peace. When people can trust one another's words, many conflicts can be avoided altogether. But what happens when conflict arises despite our best efforts to live honestly? How should we respond when someone else initiates a dispute or harms us? Jesus addressed this question in another teaching where he said, "You have heard that it was said, 'An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.'" This statement refers to a principle known as the law of retaliation. Found in the Torah, this law was intended to limit retribution, ensuring that it was proportional to the harm caused. For example, if someone damaged another person's property, they could be required to provide compensation equal to the loss, but not more. This law was designed to prevent the escalation of violence and to promote justice. However, Jesus took this principle to a new level. He taught his followers not to retaliate at all. He said, "Do not resist an evil person." Instead of seeking revenge or even demanding justice in the conventional sense, Jesus encouraged his disciples to respond to wrongdoing with bold, creative acts of nonviolence. To illustrate this, Jesus gave several examples. 1. Turning the other cheek. Jesus said, "If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." In the ancient world, a backhanded slap to the right cheek was a way of asserting dominance and humiliating the victim. By turning the other cheek, the victim refused to retaliate, but also refused to submit. This act challenged the aggressor to see the victim as an equal, worthy of respect. 2. Giving more than what is asked. Jesus said, "If someone sues you for your shirt, give them your coat as well." In ancient Israel, taking a poor person's coat as collateral was forbidden because it was also their blanket. By offering both the shirt and the coat, the victim exposed the injustice of the demand in a way that was both nonviolent and deeply generous. 3. Going the extra mile. Jesus said, "If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Under Roman law, soldiers could compel civilians to carry their gear for a mile. This was a humiliating and burdensome task. By voluntarily going an extra mile, the individual reclaimed their dignity and turned the act of oppression into an opportunity for generosity. Through these examples, Jesus demonstrated that nonviolent resistance could be a powerful way to challenge injustice and transform relationships. Rather than escalating conflict, such responses could open the door to reconciliation and peace. Jesus' most radical teaching, however, was his call to love one's enemies. He said, "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Jesus pointed to God's example, saying, "God causes the sun to rise on both the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. God's love is indiscriminate and generous, extending to all people regardless of their actions." For Jesus, this is the model his followers are called to imitate. Ultimately, Jesus described this way of life as becoming complete, saying, "Be complete as your heavenly Father is complete." This completeness, often translated as perfection, refers to living in alignment with God's character, embodying love, generosity, and peace in every aspect of life. Through these teachings, Jesus offered a vision of peace that transcends mere conflict resolution. He called his followers to be peacemakers who actively mend broken relationships and invite others into a community of love and reconciliation. Loving one's enemies is perhaps the most challenging aspect of Jesus' teachings. It requires seeing every person, even those who harm us, as bearers of God's image, deserving of respect and compassion. This kind of love is not based on emotions, but on a commitment to act in ways that promote the well-being of others, even at great personal cost. This vision remains as relevant today as it was in Jesus' time. Whether dealing with personal disputes, systemic injustices, or global conflicts, the principles of honesty, generosity, and enemy love offer a powerful pathway to real peace.